everyone, and welcome to my video on tank maintenance. I'm going to walk you through how I do my maintenance with my 400-gallon tank. So pretty much maintenance on all of the other tanks is the same, but with the 400-gallon, it would require more time commitment or maybe more cleaning. Without further ado, let's get into the video. The first step is to start draining the water. First, I'll make sure I will gather all of my supplies that I will need to complete my maintenance, so it's all in one spot. Also, I don't show it in the video, but if I had to clean the glass, or in this case with the 400-gallon, it's acrylic, I would clean the tank first so that I could remove any of the algae, debris, or even plant trimmings when I remove the water. Here you see me setting up the water exchanger. Now, this is not a sponsored video for any of the products that I'll show or you'll be seeing in this video, but this is the Python. It is fantastic and helps to make water changes a lot easier, no longer having to haul buckets, which gets very old very fast. This is something that you would hook right to the sink, and you could create a negative pressure where then you're able to drain the water from the tank right into your drain. Or you then flip a valve, twist something, and then you're able to fill the tank right from the sink. Typically, when I start draining the tank, I start by vacuuming out the substrate first. I like to try and keep my process similar for all of my tanks to make sure I don't miss anything, especially if I'm doing multiple tanks in one day. I might forget what I've done. And this is more so important, I feel, when you're working with the smaller tanks, because you may not need to drain much more water after you've completed vacuuming the substrate. You generally don't want to be doing massive water changes every time you're changing your water. So see how much you've removed with the substrate cleaning and then see if you need to drain any more. Usually you see people changing anywhere between 15 to maybe 30%, I would say on average. The smaller or low bioload tanks likely can get away with a smaller water change unless you have a dirty fish like a goldfish or maybe a puffer. What I will do typically is once I've started draining the tank after finishing vacuuming out the substrate, I will then start my water testing to determine how much water I need to drain. If I have some ammonia, I'll probably do a larger water change. If it's really not that bad and I just did it the week before, maybe I'll only do like a 15% water change. Typically, I try to do less water changes in the planted tanks because the plants will take out those nitrates, so I don't have to do as much water removal. Now to talk about water testing. I don't always do water testing. If I have a completely established tank, if I haven't made any changes, there's no new fish, no medications, no change of any sort, and everyone's acting normal, and I haven't changed their feeding schedule. Here I'm showing the API Freshwater Master Test Kit. I almost always use the liquid test because I find that it seems to be a little bit more consistent, maybe reliable, easier to interpret the test. The strips are a great reference point, but then I would find myself just doing the liquid testing just to confirm or figure out what is the actual test. Now, if I am doing any dosing, adding fish, changing the plants, changing the feeding schedule, start a new food, I will test every single week. And if any fish are acting funny, just do the test. Next, we'll be talking about cleaning the filter media. Filter media can include anything like your hang-on back filter, sumps, cartridges, sponge pads, sponge filters, bio rings, ceramic rings, stuff like that. Here you see me taking out the sponge pads and I'm rinsing them out in some of the tank water. I give it a good squeeze, kind of dunk it in, squeeze it back out, just trying to clean some of the debris off. I will also cut some of the sponge filters later on and cut them more to size, make them easier to deal with, and in preparation for me changing around the sump in the near future. Typically, what I will do is once a month, I will clean the sponge pads or the bio rings. It might be overkill, but I'm still having small particles getting through to the bio rings. And I also have snails in my sump, so I like to just give them a good rinse, make sure everything looks okay. I may be adjusting the schedule when I change the setup and design of my sump. Be sure to look out for that video in the upcoming months. Now, for rinsing out the filter media, to me, the easiest thing to do is rinse the media with some of the tank water. Set aside some of the cleaner tank water. Don't use the water that has all of the debris that you suctioned out of the bottom of the tank. You could also use separate dechlorinated water. Now, just make sure you do enough of a rinse to get most of the debris off. It doesn't have to be super clean. You don't want super clean. The more you mess with the media, the more likely you are to be messing with or altering the bacteria that's on the media that's helping to keep your tank cycled and process those waste products. If I do a large or extensive cleaning, I may add some beneficial bacteria into the tank. There are people or a school of thought that says you can rinse your filter media under tap water, which usually contains chlorine or chloramines, which can kill bacteria. The idea is that you would have time for the chemicals in the water to actually kill the bacteria. So in theory, you should be fine. Personally, I don't want to run that risk. I don't really ever do that unless I'm adding beneficial bacteria or I have a really good, compelling reason to rinse it under the tap water. I spent all this time and effort establishing a cycle. I don't want to mess with it. Yes, there is multiple areas and places that the bacteria could growing. Is it possible that that one piece of sponge filter doesn't mess with that cycle? Yes, it is possible, but I'm not going to take that risk. For all of my filters, I have changed them to be sponge pads or sponge filters. They don't clog very easily, and you have some time before they need to be cleaned. I say I clean them about once a month or so. I don't have them technically on a set schedule, but I will evaluate them every month to be cleaned. If they aren't dirty, I leave them alone. Something like a bio ring or maybe fine sponge filters may need to be cleaned a little bit more often because they get clogged a little bit easier. But look at them. If they don't look like they're dirty, they don't need to be cleaned. You can't see chunks of debris on it, leave it alone. The next step is talking about filling the tank and prepping to fill the tank. So I developed this system process after I had an issue where I forgot to put prime in the water. I thought I had, and it was for another tank. So I will have one bucket where I will, or several, where I am putting any additives or treatments in. So the bucket will get prime, which is my dechlorinator to take care of the chlorine and chloramines in the tap water. Then all my water gets neutral regulator, which helps to neutralize the pH more to a 7.0. And then for all of my planted tanks, I will do Aquarium Co-op's Easy Green. Now for the last one, it's my beneficial bacteria. I use the Fritz Zyme 7 for the freshwater and the Fritz Zyme 9 for the salt water. Sometimes I use it for the brackish. I will use that if I have to do extensive maintenance, scrubbing, or I've just recently had to medicate the tank. So one little side note about adjusting the pH. This is generally something you don't want to have to do because you end up just chasing a pH and not consistently adjusting the pH. Fish adjust and can do well to a stable pH. So you can adjust them to the water, whatever your water source is. They cannot adjust to swinging pH levels. So for all of my tanks, I put in the neutral regulator because I have swinging pH levels with my city water. I keep puffers, and I have had issues in the past with them becoming symptomatic due to the fluctuating pHs. So the city water pH can range anywhere between 6 and 8, and I can see that even with changing the water on one tank. 6 is the lowest that I can test for with the liquid test kit that I have. So who knows what the actual pH is. So if I can get the water that I'm putting in the tank to a 7, the tank can take it the rest of the way. And it's much less of an adjustment or swing in the pH, and the fish and tank will do fine. The next and final stage is the cleaning up phase. Typically weekly to maybe every other week, we'll have to flip the lids that are on top of the tank because they start to bow. They're acrylic, so they're a little bit softer. And I find the edges pull up a little bit. There's a little bit more evaporation, and I always worry that the bee shears might be able to wiggle their way out of the tank somehow. You see the one panel here is a little bit more difficult to turn because it is bigger. This is the lid that covers the overflow box. Then what I will do is clean the outside of the glass. I have switched to Fritz glass and acrylic cleaner once I got the 400-gallon tank, which is an acrylic tank. You can't use regular glass cleaner on acrylic tanks because you will damage them over time. So I got one product that I can do all of the maintenance on my tanks with. Now, there's one thing that's really important to remember whenever you're cleaning the outside of your tank. If you're using a product to clean the glass or the acrylic, you have to make sure you spray the product on your rag or your paper towel and then use that rag or paper towel to clean the surface of the tank. Don't spray the tank directly with the cleaner because you run the risk that the cleaner could get into your tank and could be really bad for your fish. Now, one last little tidbit in regards to cleaning and cleaning up. If you are using a water exchanger, a tube of some sort to drain the water, make sure you drain the water out of that tubing, because if you're not doing maintenance for a week or 2 weeks, particularly in the summertime or not a climate controlled area, you may come back with some stuff growing in that tubing. I have learned this from personal experience. What I'll do, this python is either 75 or 100 feet. What I do is I just roll it up and just make sure as I'm rolling it up, the water is draining out of the tubing. And with that, I want to thank you for joining me on my video for how to do tank maintenance on an aquarium. Be sure to follow along and be on the lookout for my next videos, which will be talking about the nitrogen cycle and why it's so important. And also, I'll be doing a video on filtration and how to filter your aquariums. Thank you for watching. Please hit the like and subscribe button, and I can't wait to see you on the next videos.